Well, outsiders, long-time viewers and fans know that Andy No has been a regular on our show from when he first started appearing in Portland and other places with his camera, a freelance journalist who basically documents the horror show that is the left-wing Antifa and increasingly Black Lives Matter demonstrations and riots. You'll remember that Andy, of course, was attacked at one of these demonstrations and only hours later was on Outsiders. I'm delighted to say he hasn't been attacked recently and hopefully won't be attacked anytime soon, but he is with us here on Outsiders from Nashville. How are you, Andy? Great to see you.
I'm well, thank you for having me on again.
Excellent. Now, some news which has just come through about an unfortunate death at a rally. Tell us what's happened.
So just a few hours ago, there was a patriotic-themed rally being held in Denver, Colorado. And of course, anytime you hold some type of pro-police or pro-Trump or pro-USA event in an urban area in America, you're going to have the far left, like Antifa, come. And that's exactly what happened. There was a counter rally by BLM Antifa, and unfortunately, there has been a homicide related to a shooting. And the reporting from the local reporters so far indicate that the suspect shooter is affiliated with the left-wing side. And that's all the details that I have at the moment.
Rita.
Well, this follows what we saw in Portland, where an Antifa member shot dead a Trump supporter. That didn't seem to get all the coverage that you would expect an event like that would receive. Tell us about what's happening at Portland, because we know they've got the far-left mayor there, Ted Wheeler, but he's in trouble. There's someone who's even more left-wing than him, who's the Antifa candidate, and she looks like she might win the race, the election race.
I'm glad you brought up the shooting that happened in Portland in late August by a so-called 100% Antifa person based on what he wrote in his manifesto. And what's frustrating about all these shootings of people associated, victims on the right, is that their names aren't remembered. And I think, rightfully we remember names like Heather Heyer, who was killed in Charlottesville. Her life mattered, but the life of Aaron Danielson mattered, and I don't know the name of the victim today. But in Portland, what's happened is we have somebody who is now pulling ahead of Mayor Wheeler, Sarah Inaroni, and she identifies not just as Antifa, but supports the cause, and when pressed on it, has doubled down. And I'm at a loss for words. I think a lot of the support she has isn't necessarily because people support her. I think it's because they're anti-Ted Wheeler and they're not aware of the radical views that this woman espouses. But hopefully through my reporting and reporting that's gone in the national press now at this point, Portlanders are waking up and seeing we have a choice between bad and worse, unfortunately, so pick wisely.
James.
I want to ask you about something else that's happening. Now, we've seen a long trend of Antifa and the left trying to force businesses to support their cause. Can you tell us what's happening with the consumer review website Yelp and how that is now looking to basically trumpet any accusations made against a business for racism or other sort of unwoke behavior, and how that might wind up, backfiring not just on companies, but also Yelp itself?
So part of what makes the far left grievance ideology so potent is that it's supported by big tech, right? People are getting canceled and banned left and right if they're perceived to be somehow transgressing some of the dogma. Unfortunately, Yelp, which has for a long time signaled the support of far left causes, is now moving in a direction that's really potentially damaging to businesses, in that they've announced that they're going to be putting on racism warnings based on businesses that have been accused of racism. And we've seen over and over how those accusations are falsely used to destroy people's lives. And now this may be destroying people's livelihoods. What we're seeing in Portland, some far left accounts associated with Antifa groups in Portland, is that they're already compiling lists of businesses that they say espouse pro-police views or conservative views, and this is just opening the door to exploitation and harassment of business owners that puts their livelihoods on the line.
Rita?
It's tantamount to extortion, if you ask me, because these groups can put all sorts of pressure on businesses and say, if you've got an American flag in the window or a Blue Lives Matter, we're going to accuse you of racism and destroy your business. It really is quite frightening. What recourse do businesses have, though? Because, like you said, big tech is dominated by the left. How do people fight against this?
You know, the details of this plan hasn't really been unveiled by Yelp yet, so it remains to be seen what mechanisms are in place to prevent abuse. Unfortunately, just on the face of it, like you said, it doesn't take very much for people on the far left to accuse somebody of being racist. A flag is seen as racist. A couple of years ago in Portland, we had a business that didn't serve a black customer after they had closed. They were accused of racism and they were boycotted. So that's the standard we're dealing with in not just Portland, but many cities in America.
Can I also ask you, sorry, Rowan, just about the support Black Lives Matter enjoys from corporate America? We've seen so much violence in the last 3 months. I've seen people killed, businesses destroyed, literally billions of dollars worth of damage, and yet that hasn't really done anything to damage their standing in the corporate world. They are still widely supported, or has that changed?
Publicly, they get a lot of wide support, but the polling does indicate changes. I think, and that's a good development, because BLM and other far left movements cloak themselves in things like racial justice, social justice to prevent criticism. But as you just laid out, what they lay out is a path of rubble, death, violence, and destruction.
Andy, just before we go quickly, we normally see you in Portland. You're in Nashville, which I hope would be country music, might be a bit friendlier to Trump, I don't know. But tell us what it's like on the ground in Nashville, just the people you meet when you're not actually in the middle of some mad Antifa riot.
Well, I went to Broadway Street last night, and surprisingly, it was very packed. The nearby states in the American South are dealing with hurricanes right now, so a lot of them have gone to Nashville for the weekend and to have a good time at the clubs and bars. Hopefully, the hurricanes don't result in damage to property and lives, but we'll see.
So what's the mood on the ground in terms of the election coming up? How much support for the Dems? How much support for Trump? Is COVID a big factor in everyday Americans' thinking?
When I'm talking to conservative voters, they seem to be enthusiastic about Trump's win, but they're really scared about being located in a liberal blue city on election night. I think some of the violence that we saw 4 years ago in 2016 will absolutely pale in comparison if Trump is to be announced to be the winner in November. And
where will you be on election night, Andy?
I haven't decided yet, but Portland's not a safe place to be, for sure.
Well, we look forward to next time getting you back on the show, and keep up the great work, Andy No.